What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my solo role-playing and wargaming channel. I'm the Lonely Dungeoneer, and this is Session 3 of Let's Play Chainmail Solo. In the last session, we were using ideas from Mythic Magazine Volume 33, the article Open World Sandbox Solo Play, to fill our sandbox, our new campaign setting, Westmoor, with sand. We started off by fleshing out the region's major religious systems. We discovered that there are two primary monotheistic religions in Westmoor. One is Ital, the goddess of cosmic war, who is the divine inspiration for the forces of law, being the playable humanoid races in Westmoor. And Ital must contend with Zafar, the god of goblinoids. In a region where disparate bands of kobolds have assembled, organizing themselves into a larger force of chaos. We also learned more about the sinister evil from beyond the northern peaks. We discovered that there is, in fact, a visual indicator to the denizens of Westmoor that something is afoot behind the frozen peaks. We discovered that at night, when the sun sets, you can see a red, deep red, aurora borealis type light that emits from behind the mountains, letting everyone in the region know that something isn't quite right. And with all of that fresh context in mind, we then turned to the Sandbox generator, a tool that you can use to craft a living fantasy universe, one hex at a time. And we kicked off our sandbox generation by starting to create a new settlement, a village named Nisme-le-bains, with a population of roughly 50 people. The only real interesting feature of the village is that they have a butcher and a hot springs. We also discovered that a brewery is moving into the village, but it hasn't quite made it there and opened yet. Now, we also determined what kind of defenses that the town, the village I should say, of Nisme-le-bains might possess, and we discovered that they have a pair of watchtowers, one at each end of the village. We have this row-type organization. If you're watching the episode, you can see this organization of the town along some primary road with secondary roads breaking off from the primary at 90-degree angles. And at each end of the village is a watchtower. Now, something that we didn't do in the last session is roll for a number of guards. So we're going to roll 1d3. We're going to make that happen with a d6. And we're going to add 3 to that, and then multiply the number by the village size to determine how many guards protect the village. Our village size is 1, so that's going to be a multiplication by 1. If you'll remember, last time we rolled for village size, and we got a result of small. So this is the smallest village, right, that we can create or come across. There is a size smaller than village called a hamlet. This is just barely above a hamlet. All right, let's roll a d6 and see how many guards are defending the town. We got a 3, which will translate to a 2 on a 1d3. 2 plus 3 is 5. So we have a grand total of 5 guards. Wow, so out of the roughly 50 population, about 10% of them, that's interesting. 5 of them are guards, and they defend the town, the village, from 2 watchtowers stationed at each end of a larger main road. Now, interestingly, the next step would be to roll for a disposition of the villagers towards the player characters and modified by charisma, which is interesting. So we have this range of dispositions from attack on sight to enthusiastic that we can actually roll for. And I don't want to do this quite yet until I understand who the player characters are. I'm imagining that based on the situation, we could make assumptions about a settlement's disposition towards the player. if we already understand what that disposition should be, if we aren't aware of the disposition of a settlement towards our player characters, we can certainly roll for that here. Now, interestingly, there's also a ruler's disposition that we can roll on, right? And there's a chance that the ruler of a settlement has a different disposition than the populace, and that is quite interesting. Quite interesting indeed. So we'll come back to this roll if we deem it necessary after we create our player characters, and assuming that we want to begin our journey in this village. Okay, let's move on to step 7. We have notable NPCs and rulers that our characters could run into. We have a secret, and then we have events. And this is interesting because I don't know, I'm not sure yet if myself as the game master, if I want to roll on these tables for a solo campaign. Events make sense, right? When entering a town, you could roll to see if there's an event in place, because that's something that your player character would experience. But the secret is interesting, because as a player character, we don't actually want to know the village's secret up front. We want to discover that through role-playing. And Mythic is going to help us with that. Also, notable NPCs. This is really interesting. We could possibly roll for this and just see if a random event takes place, if it has to do with a notable NPC. Yeah, I'm not 100% certain what I'm going to do with these two tables. And actually, okay, I think I know how I want to handle this. I think I actually do want to roll on these tables, but to treat their results as potential context. Not quite context yet. These are suggestions that could make their way into our adventure, but they're not real until something brings them into the adventure. And so, for instance, let's say we rolled on the notable NPCs table and we got a, let's say, bandit in disguise, right? Unless something happens in the town that makes us think of the bandit in disguise, then the bandit's not there. But as soon as something happens and suddenly we think, oh, that could be the bandit in disguise, the potential context that we're aware of, we can ask the Oracle at that point and allow the Oracle to choose whether to guide us towards or away from that notable NPC. And so in this way, we have some kind of context being potentially introduced by the Sandbox generator here, but we still keep it as a surprise because it's not certain that this NPC will ever come up. They very well might not, and our adventure can go in all kinds of different ways with or without the NPC being inserted by the Sandbox generator. So hopefully that makes sense. We're going to treat these results as potential context, which should be interesting. Okay, so rolling on the notable NPCs list, we want to roll 1d20 as many times as the village size to determine what interesting characters can be found. So I'll grab the d20. We know that we have a village size of 1. So we're going to roll for a single notable NPC. And we get, oh, look at that, landed right in the middle. We're going to reroll. And we get a 9, which is a misunderstood witch. Wow, there's a misunderstood witch potentially in the village. I'm going to make a note of that. And next we're going to roll for a ruler. We're going to roll a d8. And we're going to get 4. That is a mayor. There is a mayor of Nisme-le-bains. That makes sense. Okay, so next we're going to roll for a secret. Okay, and so with the secret, we're going to roll a 1d6 to check if the village even has a secret. And then if that result is 1, then we'll roll on the secrets table, and that'll become potential context for our campaign. And for the record, I'm going to take mayor as actual context, not as potential context. So far, the only potential context we have for Nisme-le-bains is a misunderstood witch. Okay, let's roll 1d6 for a secret. and we get a 4, so there's no secret. Okay, so finally we're going to roll for an event. Roll 1d6 to see if there is an event. If the result is 1, roll a 1d6 on the following table. Okay, so we'll start with a 1d6 to see if there's an event, and we get a 6. So there is at least currently not anything special going on at Nisme-le-bains. Okay, now this is a good amount of context, but I still want to rabbit hole a bit further. And the first thing I want to know is if the town of Nisme-le-bains is a part of some larger kingdom, government of some kind. Is there some larger government in this region that Nisme-le-bains, the village, is a part of? Now, this context is going to come into conflict with the Sandbox generator, which has rules for the moment that a larger city-type settlement is created, generated right next to a village. So with that caveat, that still could happen if we generate a city literally right next to Nisme-le-bains. Assuming that that's not going to happen, I want to know if there's some larger, further than 1 hex away organization that Nisme-le-bains belongs to, some kind of government. And I'm going to say that this is, it's probably unlikely given that we are on the frontier. There might be some larger government that exists in the flat or maybe plains area of the world. I'm assuming that somewhere beyond the hilly frontier is a different kind of primary biome, and that maybe there's some larger governments in that place that sent these colonists out to the frontier in the first place, but that might not be the case. Those are all expectations of mine, but the Oracle could certainly subvert all of those expectations. So I guess, yeah, I'll ask the question, is Nisme-le-bains a part of a larger government? I'll make this very unlikely. Is that right? That's what I want to do? Okay, yeah, I'll make it just unlikely. We'll leave it up to fate a little more. Unlikely, that's going to be a -1. We roll, and we get a 7 and a 3 is 10, -1 is 9. That is a no. So again, unless we generate a city right next to Nisme-le-bains, we're going to consider this to be an independent village on the frontier. Okay, now the next thing that I wanted to ask is about the water supply. So we know that Nisme-le-bains has access to a hot springs, which may be what is keeping the town going without access to other water. But I wanted to ask, we already know that cities, towns, probably not villages or hamlets, probably larger cities, upstream, some of them are controlling the water supply with dams, with feats of engineering. We have a large-scale water problem where the water supply is dwindling, and some of these larger settlements upstream are choosing to hold onto that water for themselves at the expense of maybe smaller settlements downstream. And so I want to ask, did Nisme-le-bains have a water source running through it? Ever? Has it ever had, other than the hot springs, an actual like river or stream running nearby the town within the same hex? I'm going to say that this is, they have a springs. Would that be enough water for a settlement? I think it would be. I'm going to say it's 50-50 if there is or was another water source. Let's roll. We get a 1 and a 3, no. Okay, so Nisme-le-bains is indeed not affected by the water supply issue. I was wondering if maybe they had a water supply cut off, but were able to carry on with the spring despite the water being reduced, but that is not the case here. Very cool. Okay, so then the next thing I want to know is if there's, and I'm thinking of the dams, right? I'm thinking that mechanical engineering has some presence in this campaign, and I think it's really interesting. Do they have any kind of interesting pump type system that interacts with our hot springs in any way? I'm going to say that this is a small village. I'm going to say that this is nearly impossible. We'll make it very unlikely. I'm going to say this is very unlikely, but it would be cool if there was some kind of mechanical, or maybe even magical, probably mechanical pump, somehow collecting and making use of the spring water, some kind of mechanical system, because that would be interesting. All right, we'll roll, and we get a 7 and a 6, which is a 13, and -2 is still an 11. So yes, there's some kind of interesting mechanical contraption. I'm so excited by that answer. Some kind of mechanical contraption that is in the springs that maybe pumps the water out for the town's use. Do they have like some kind of really rudimentary plumbing system? We don't have electricity, so I might have to think about how that would actually work. Maybe there's a gravity-based something. I'm not sure. That is there some kind of like maybe aqueduct, right? That's like using gravity to distribute the hot spring water to the population. We'll call that likely. 3 and 1, so it's not gravity-based. So instead, you could have some kind of siphoning system, right, where you have a vacuum on one end and air pressure on the other. The air pressure would actually come from the surface of the spring and gravity pushing down on whatever kind of plumbing system that they have. If they were able to create a vacuum at the other end, then they could potentially continuously siphon water, and they could even have some kind of flow control to slow the pace down. They could even have some kind of, I'm imagining like at an old-timey doctor's office, or what is it? Is it an optometrist for your eyes? Where they have all of the different mirrors, lenses, all the different lenses with the different focus that they can like pull in and out of, snap in and out of place. Like maybe they have those kinds of things, but instead of a lens, it's a some kind of metal circle that controls the flow of water moving through it in the other direction. And maybe that distributes water to their fields. Maybe it distributes water, drinking water, to buildings. That's pretty cool. So that's a unique feature of Nisme-le-bains. They have some kind of local engineered plumbing system. Do they have someone local that knows how to fix this if anything were to go wrong? I'm going to say this is very unlikely. And we get a 10 and a 3, that's 13, -2 is 11. There is a local engineer that lives in Nisme-le-bains for the purpose of keeping this aqueduct siphon, this siphon-based aqueduct, flowing and moving anytime it breaks down. Maybe we'll... I wonder how reliable it is. Is the aqueduct system very reliable? I'm going to call this 50-50. Yes. 8 and 7 is 15, so yes, it's definitely reliable. I was wondering if some aspect of the setting here might be this thing always breaking down and causing an inconvenience of some kind, but it seems like it is pretty reliable. Okay, that's cool. So we're not connected to any other government. We have this interesting aqueduct pump system, siphon-based, and we have a resident engineer. I'm going to make notes of all of this. And then I guess the next thing that I'd want to know is a little bit more about the mayor of Nisme-le-bains. This person is the leader of the town. So I'm going to jump to the meaning tables. We're going to discover meaning on one of the characters tables. We're going to roll on character personality, character descriptions. I think because we haven't met them yet to know the personality, we're going to roll for character descriptors. So we're going to discover meaning on this table to describe the mayor. Let's roll for 2 words. Our first is 33. That is commanding. Okay. Commanding. And 20, busy. Okay. So we have a very active and commanding leader type mayor. What is their name? Let's roll for a name off of the names table for the mayor of Nisme-le-bains. Okay. Rolling for the first sound. We get 36, that is gra. Second sound, we get 5, which is an. Gran. Okay. Gra into an, which it could be like gran. Do we want another sound? Groan? Do we want to make it, is groan his name? Okay. Yeah, we'll go with that. So groan, I'm going to make it just G-R-O-N with a hard O. Well, maybe we can look at what kind of accent makes the O hard. Maybe is it a straight line over the O? I honestly can't remember. So groan is the mayor of Nisme-le-bains, and he is busy and commanding. Okay, now I think I'm ready to actually create a character, and I'm really excited for this. I think this is more than enough context to work with. We're in Westmoor, in Nisme-le-bains, but who are we? Who are we? We are now going to actually step out of the realm of Mythic, which we've spent the last 2 sessions playing in, and out of the realm of the Sandbox generator, and we're finally going to step into our core role-playing system, Original Dungeons and Dragons. This is book 1, Myth and Magic, and this is the book we will use to create a player character for the campaign. And we're going to supplement these rules with Scarlet Heroes. This is a book that also contains its own entire campaign setting, its own RPG setting for the game. But the core mechanic of Scarlet Heroes is to allow one player character to have the same power level of about 4 player characters, so that you can have the power of a party of 4 while playing as only 1 player character. And this is great when you're playing solo, primarily because, primarily when you want to play a game that requires a party. And original D&D basically implies a large party. Even the power of 4 individuals is not going to be enough for us to just make our way around the world, pushing everything around. We're not gonna be dominating the game world right out of the gates by using this. But this will give a single player character a good fighting chance to survive against the mobs of low-level creatures that you can encounter when playing original Dungeons & Dragons, a highly dangerous and lethal game. Now, I'd actually love for there to be some in-narrative reason for our player character to be more powerful than other members of the same class. And if you'll recall from the first session, I had just finished watching Star Wars, and I was feeling nostalgic about Episode 1 in particular, the relationship between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, young Obi-Wan. And I actually read the book, the Star Wars book, Master and Apprentice, which is so very good. Maybe I'll link that down below in case you're curious or interested. But I was thinking about how in original Dungeons & Dragons you have these forces of law and these forces of chaos that are always waging war with one another, right? The alignment system is kind of baked into original D&D. And I was thinking, what if we leaned into that and brought in this idea of the Guardian Knight from the Star Wars universe, but in an original D&D context? What if we had a neutral order of knights, whose mission is not to help Law to win the eternal cosmic war, not to support Ital in her maybe quest for dominance, but also not to support the forces of chaos, but rather to ensure that in all things there is balance, maybe neutrality here, rather than being neutral is often seen as, and I think rightfully so, as not being involved with law or chaos. And in this context, when we have a neutral individual is someone that's just not fighting for law or for chaos. But in our case, this could actually be someone that is morally invested in balance. And I actually really love this idea. Star Wars is one of my favorite universes, and I mentioned before that I play a lot of RuneScape. RuneScape is by far my favorite video game. My favorite god in RuneScape is Guthix. Guthix was the god of balance. And so this fits my personality. This would fit my personality rather well. And these Guardian Knights could be, by virtue of their training, more powerful than other individuals of the same class in this campaign setting. And so, being one of these Guardian Knights could actually be the in-campaign setting reason for a character to receive the bonuses to output damage and the reduction to incoming damage provided by Scarlet Heroes. And this actually makes a lot of sense. If you'll remember, in the Star Wars universe, the Jedi Knights are able to deflect, defend, block all kinds of wild incoming attacks purely by nature of their ridiculous swordsmanship. And this will translate well into Scarlet Heroes. We have this mechanic called the Fray die. The Fray die is a die that you can roll every combat round that allows you to deal the incidental output damage, the small swipes that you would see some heroic type of character making, like in a movie, for instance. And it only affects, I would say, minion type creatures. It's anyone that is on your level or lower. So if your opponent has the same number of hit dice as the player character or lower, and they're within your melee range, then this Fray die is going to allow you to deal extra damage to those lower hit die creatures. And this will give the game the feel of like a Jedi Knight slinging their lightsaber around, but in this case it'll be a blade. And we could choose to begin the game as one of these Guardian Knights, and we would stand a fair chance against the lower level encounters that we might come up against in the universe. But I'm thinking that it might be even more interesting if we were to begin the game as an apprentice to one of these Guardian Knights and to earn that Scarlet Hero's power as a reward for completing the process of becoming a knight. And so I think my game plan is going to be to craft a clerical order of peacekeeping knights whose mission is to deploy these neutral alignment knights across the campaign setting to maintain peace and balance wherever there is conflict and imbalance. And then we'll actually create 2 characters, one of which will be an NPC. And this character will already be a fully fledged Guardian Knight, meaning that they will have the damage output increase and damage input reduction granted by Scarlet Heroes. They will be a Scarlet Hero's character. And this character will serve as a mentor to a second character. And this is actually going to be our player character, our solo role-playing character, is going to be, at the beginning of the campaign, an apprentice to this neutral alignment guardian knight. And as an apprentice, we will be playing as a normal level 1 original D&D player character. And if we can successfully become a knight of this order, then and only then will our player character ascend, if you will, to the status of a Scarlet Hero. And at that point, I think it's pretty safe to assume that our player character will be expected to go out on their own and to adventure by themselves as this guardian knight. And so early on in the campaign, we will be in danger playing as a normal original D&D character, but we'll always have access to this much more powerful mentor NPC, early on at least. So that's going to be a pro, but the con is going to be that we are very much bound. Our destiny is very much intertwined with this NPC's decision-making. Now, as soon as we become a Guardian Knight, then we'll be playing the game as a Scarlet Hero, which will make the game world much more safe for us. We'll be able to branch out on our own and make our own decisions, go on our own adventures alone. And we'll have earned that in setting, right? We'll have a narrative reason why our player character is more powerful than other characters of the same class and level. So let's actually get started by asking the Oracle some questions about this order of neutral alignment knights. And I guess the first thing that I want to know is if there's some location in the world, some abbey-like, tower-like structure that serves as a source of power for this religion, this religious order. And I don't know if this is, I'm thinking of whether this is likely or not. It seems like for a religion, you would want to have some kind of seat of power where maybe a council meets, I'm thinking a la Jedi Council, to decide what missions are worth undertaking by knights of the order. But you could also have a structure where each knight goes out on their own. Maybe they assemble as needed, not at a core location. Maybe they don't want to have that kind of hierarchy. But it actually seems more likely to me that there would be some kind of hierarchy. That actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that seems very likely, but I think that there's plenty of room for an alternative structure. So asking if there's one location that serves as the seat of power for this religious order, we'll call it very likely. All right, we get 8 and 6 is 14 plus 2 is 16. That is a yes. Okay, so there's some location out there that's the home base, if you will, of this religious order. From this location, they send out knights across the setting. Are there other abbeys around the known world that are like sub-hubs, other locations, maybe like a regional dispatch, right, for peacekeeping services, peacekeeping missions? I'm going to say that this is also very likely. We get a 5 and a 2 is a 7 plus 2 is 9. That's a no. So there are not regional abbeys around the world. There's one primary abbey from which the religious order performs its mission. And I guess that doesn't mean that if it's a clerical order, if they're high-level clerics, that doesn't mean that they can't go out and found their own abbeys, but those abbeys would belong to one knight, and they would not represent a regional dispatch structure, right? If you will. Okay, so that's very interesting. Now, I'm curious about the name, and I want to have some kind of cool name. I guess the two things that I immediately come to mind are, based on Scarlet Heroes, we could call them Scarlet Knights, right? Or also based on like my channel name, The Lonely Dungeoneer, they could be called Lonely Knights because they typically travel the world as individuals. And maybe there's like a master level. Actually, if there's a hierarchy, a Jedi Master might be the level. Are Jedi Masters the only one that can train Padawans? Was Qui-Gon a Master? No, he wasn't. He actually wasn't a Master. Not that that really matters for our campaign setting, right? But I'm wondering if there's some higher tier of knight that would train an apprentice. That might be unusual. Most of the time, these knights are traveling solo as individuals, and so maybe they could be known as Lonely Knights, and either one of those names would be pretty sick. So I guess I'll be conceited and I'll ask, are they called Lonely Knights? I'll call this very likely. And we get a 10 and a 4. Plus 2 is 16, so that is a yes. This is the Order of Lonely Knights. And Lonely Knight actually might be what they're referred to as. They might call themselves something different. Is Lonely Knight a slang term, or is it a nickname, a title that you receive, but maybe they're not actually called the Lonely Knights? Maybe Lonely Knight is just a title. I'm going to ask if that's the case. I'm going to say that it's very likely. I'm going to say it's nearly certain that this is the case, that they're not just called the Lonely Knights, because I feel like they'd have some kind of more official title. You know what? Actually, that's not nearly certain. I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to say it's 50-50 that that's what the order is actually called. Order of the Lonely Knights. So 8. No, that is not a nickname. They are actually known as the Lonely Knights. Okay. Very interesting. Now, this is almost certainly a clerical order. I'm actually going to ask, is this a clerical order? We'll make it certain. We get a 2 and a 1. Plus 5 is an 8. No, it is not a strictly clerical order. This is interesting because I was planning on making these Guardian Knights like multi-class clerics and fighters, and we might still be able to do that. Maybe that's just what it's implying, that it's not following a particular deity. Wow. We kind of already called this a religious order. They don't serve as clerics. Interesting. So this seems to imply that this is not a religious order, actually. It's an order of knights, but they're not of clerical knights. I was imagining that this was an entire order of clerics, and maybe even fighter clerics, right? Scarlet Heroes actually has rules for multi-classing, and so I thought it was possible or potentially that these Guardian Knights could be multi-classed fighter clerics, but it doesn't sound like that's the case. Maybe they're just high wisdom fighters. Maybe that's all they are. Maybe they're just fighters that also have the wisdom that you would expect from a cleric, but perhaps they don't actually have any magical power. Maybe they truly are, or I should say clerical power, right? Like divine might. Perhaps they truly are just, I say just there very loosely, exceptional at combat. And maybe even if they are religious, could they be a religious order that are not clerics? Maybe they don't study how to spellcast. Maybe their divine gift is excellence at arms? Do we interpret this as like these knights being divinely granted the ability to win at combats, or to have exceptional speed, exceptional grace, exceptional skill, divinely gifted skill at swordplay? Yeah, I guess that's how we can interpret this, and that is very, very interesting. And I don't think it precludes the ability of one of these guardian knights to go and learn magic, or to learn clerical abilities, because Scarlet Heroes gives us the option to multiclass, but it just means that that's not the default of who the Lonely Knights are. They're not clerics, they're fighters. And they're fighters that can multiclass, but they are first and foremost divinely appointed fighters. And actually, let's ask that. Now that we know that this is not a clerical order, I want to ask, is it religious at all? And I think that this is very likely. This is actually, I would say, nearly certain that there should be some religious aspect to this order, but it might not be clerical. It might not be a deity in the sense that we are maybe used to or expecting from a clerical order in Dungeons and Dragons. This is so interesting. Are they religious at all? This is nearly certain. 7 and a 3 is a 10 plus 4 is 14. That is a yes. Okay. Do they follow one particular deity? Now, since we know this is not a clerical order, I'm actually going to say this means that it's unlikely, very unlikely even, that this order follows one specific deity. That's going to give us a -2 to our roll. We get an 8 and a 2 is a 10. -2 is 8. That is a no. They are religious, but not monotheistic. And even if they're pantheistic, they don't follow one particular deity. Okay, if this is a religion around balance, maybe they believe in some force, pun intended, that pervades the universe, much like the Jedi in Star Wars. And if this is the case, I'm going to find this wild if the Oracle kind of pushed us in this direction, because I was totally going to roll with maybe a single deity for a typical clerical order. That made the most sense to me, because I wasn't really trying to completely follow Star Wars. And we have 2 other monotheistic religions, so it just kind of made sense to me that we'd have a third. But the dice are subverting that expectation. The Oracle is guiding us another way. So this is going to be really, really interesting if this is the case. But I'm going to ask, do they believe in some pervading force in the universe as their object of worship or spirituality? And I'm going to say that this is likely. Not very likely, just likely. We get an 11 plus 1. That's a 12. That is a yes. So we have Lonely Knights, Guardian Knights of peace and balance in the universe. And they believe in some all-pervasive force that grants them, we'll call it divine energy, expressed through their swordplay, first and foremost, in their raw prowess, right? Maybe not even strength, but like grace, elegance, right? Their ability to defend themselves adeptly and to strike others deftly, right? This is first and foremost their divine gift, but also the divine gift to multi-class. They are actually able to pick up clerical powers if they choose, if they can, or even magical abilities if they can. Wow, this is quite interesting. Okay, so this force that pervades the universe, is it primarily rooted in life, in organic kind of sources? Or imagining that this is is it like in RuneScape where you have the anima mundi, which is like this organic magical life force kind of energy? Or is it more like Star Wars? Well, I guess in Star Wars the force is it's all between life forces, not really like, well, I guess like the rock, and doesn't Yoda say the rock in the tree? I'm not sure. I think the force might imply that inanimate objects are a part of the relationship, as opposed to it being purely organic. So I guess that's my question here, is this pervading universal force mainly rooted in organic life-giving sources? I'm going to call this 50-50. We get a 5 and a 2, that's a no. Okay. There are other sources that it could come from. How about light? Is this some kind of light that they believe that they are carrying with them? That doesn't feel very balanced. Light and dark together would be balance. So if it's not just life, then maybe instead of rolling for another option, maybe we can just assume that this is a truly universal force that they believe in. And we really need to come up with a better term than force for this, or this is going to be way too much Star Wars. I know that we're ripping a lot from Star Wars here, but I don't want to literally keep the name the Force. We have to come up with something else. And I actually think I'm going to leave it here because I actually want to ask you this question. I have 2 questions for you, the viewers, and feel free to comment your answers down below. I want to know what you think we should call the universally pervading force that empowers the Lonely Knights in this campaign setting. First off, what would you call that force? And second, this should correlate with your answer to the first. What is the source? What is the source of this power in the universe? If you have any creative ideas, I'd love to hear them, and extra bonus points and kudos if your name for this force in some way correlates with the source of power that you present. I'd love to know what you think. I know there's a lot of creative individuals out there, and this could be a cool way to get your idea into the campaign setting, and it would definitely help me out a lot if, maybe we could come together as a group and decide something epic for the campaign. I would really, really enjoy that. In today's session, we managed to complete the random generation of the village Nisme-le-bains, and to dive further into some of its more interesting details, such as who its mayor is, and a fairly interesting plumbing situation, piping hot springs water from the springs to buildings around the village. That was really cool. And from there, our conversation flowed towards an order of neutral alignment, peacekeeping guardian knights that spread across Westmoor and beyond, that spread across the campaign setting, resolving conflicts and keeping the peace. And we determined that our player character, our solo role-playing character, will start this campaign as an apprentice to a fully fledged knight, and we determined that these knights would be called the Lonely Knights. And so we have a lonely knight as our mentor. We're an apprentice, and if we can follow in their footsteps and complete the process of becoming a lonely knight, then we will gain the abilities granted by the book Scarlet Heroes. And so in the next session, We'll start by carrying on our conversation surrounding the Lonely Knights, answering any loose questions that we might have, and also discussing what the name for this all-pervading force might be, and what its possible origins or focus might be. And again, feel free to comment your ideas for this down below. I would absolutely love to take an idea from a viewer, from a comment, and to incorporate that into the campaign. I think that would be so very cool. So please feel free to share your ideas. But then following that, we'll finally move into the character creation process, where I'm going to be very excited to actually step through the creation of 2 separate characters. The first will be an NPC, a fully fledged Lonely Knight to serve as a mentor to our player character, to our solo role-playing character, who will be created as just a normal, original Dungeons & Dragons player character, but that will serve as apprentice to a Lonely Knight with the intention of becoming a Lonely Knight. And if our player character can ever complete that process and earn that title, then they will also earn access to all of the powers and benefits granted by Scarlet Heroes. If you've enjoyed today's session, don't forget to hit that like button and to subscribe for more solo role-playing content. And if that's not enough, you'll find even more solo role-playing actual plays in written format on my blog at lonelydungeoneer.blog. Thanks again for watching. I'm the Lonely Dungeoneer, and this has been Session 3 of Let's Play Chainmail Solo. Until we meet again, happy delving, and fight on!